13.5 Europeans in the Indies. As earlier chapters explained, the collapse of the Mongol rule in Asia, starting in the 1300s, led to the rise of large, centrally governed states. In the centuries that followed, Muslim empires stretched from India across Southwest Asia and North Africa. China moved westward into Central Asia. Russia expanded eastward. These powerful states, with much to gain from trade, helped keep Asia's overland trade routes secure. During the same period, European states pioneered the sea route around Africa and then steadily extended oceanic trade throughout the Indian Ocean and east to China. Overland routes funneled trade goods to dozens of European trading posts planted along the coast. For the first time in history, Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas were directly connected by a global trading network. Portugal gains access to Asian maritime trade. The great powers of Asia focused on expanding their land-based empires. They did take part in maritime trade, or sea-based trade, but they claimed no political right of ownership over the seas. Europeans were more possessive. In 1499, Vasco da Gama laid claim to the entire Indian Ocean for Portugal. The Portuguese set about building a trading empire based on territorial rights granted them in the Treaty of Tordesillas. Portugal's main goal was to sail to the Indies, trade for spices and other luxury goods, and sail back home. There was just one problem. The Asians did not need or want most European goods. Instead of exchanging products, Europeans would have to pay for Asian goods with money, mainly silver. One option was to take part in the intra-Asian trade. Some merchants began carrying foods and other ordinary goods from one part of the Indies to another, making a profit on each trade. Over time, they built up cargoes that could be exchanged for fine spices, black pepper, ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, and cloves. Indian textiles, Chinese porcelain, and other Asian goods highly prized by Europeans. To conduct trade, Portuguese merchants needed land bases. They often used force to get them. By the 1500s, European long-distance cargo ships came equipped with cannons. The Portuguese used those cannons to attack and take control of key coastal towns. In this way, they captured Goa in India, Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, and Malacca on the Malay Peninsula. Malacca was the center of the East Indian spice trade. It also controlled the narrow Strait of Malacca. This led from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, and thus served as the eastern gateway to China and Japan. The Portuguese used their naval advantage to dominate shipping in the Indian Ocean. They overpowered Asian merchant vessels and stole their cargoes. They blocked access to traditional shipping routes, too. One such route carried spices and other luxury goods through the Red Sea and across Egypt to the Mediterranean. The Portuguese never established a complete monopoly on the coastal trade because Asian merchants fought back. Some armed their ships. Others changed their trade routes. Over time, however, the Portuguese gained control of a large part of the intra-Asian trade. The European model of expansion. By the mid-1500s, the Portuguese had established an effective model of expansion into Asian trade. The model had three basic parts. 1. The Portuguese relied on their superior ships armed with gunpowder weapons to establish land bases and achieve control of the seas. 2. At their land bases, they established trading posts called factories. These commercial centers managed Portuguese trade and finances in the region. 3. Finally, they built fortresses to protect their factories and the small colonies that arose nearby. By 1600, the Portuguese had a string of more than 50 fortified coastal trading posts from East Africa all the way to Japan. To this time, the only other European state competing with Portugal in Asia was Spain, which controlled the Philippines. Soon, however, Portugal had a lot more company in the Indies. In the 1600s, the Dutch and the English, by applying the same model of expansion, would nearly eliminate Portugal from the Asian trade. Competing for the Asian trade. The English in 1600 and the Dutch in 1602 each formed an East India Company to carry out long-distance trade with Asia. The government of England gave the English East India Company, and only that company, the right to trade with Asia. The government of the Netherlands authorized its Dutch East India Company not only to conduct trade, but also to carry out political negotiations and to engage in warfare. The Dutch would fight to limit the success of the English in the Indies and to eliminate the Portuguese from the region. Like the Portuguese, the Dutch took a military approach to creating a trading empire in the Indies. They hired experienced naval officers to help establish and maintain their outposts. Negotiations with local Asian officials went much more smoothly when a ship bristling with cannons anchored just offshore. The Dutch East India Company set up factories in India and Japan and points in between, but they focused their efforts on the East Indies. In the East Indies, the Dutch hoped to monopolize the spice trade by taking control of the Spice Islands, now part of eastern Indonesia. There, most of the world's supply of nutmeg, mace, and cloves grew. First, the Dutch wrested control of the islands from the Portuguese. Then they used force and threats of force to compel local leaders to cooperate. In one group of islands, they slaughtered the native people and took over the production of their nutmeg and mace, bringing in enslaved Africans to cultivate the trees that yielded the spices. Then, in 1641, they seized Malacca from the Portuguese. The English East India Company, at least at first, took a less violent approach to the Asian trade. Its traders sought permission before locating a factory on foreign territory. Kept out of East Indies by the Dutch, the English focused on trade with India. There, they negotiated for trading rights with the Mughal Empire and local Indian officials. English merchants followed a fairly standard trading procedure. They used silver to buy Indian textiles and then traded the textiles in the East Indies for pepper and other spices, which they shipped to England. They also carried Indian cotton and indigo, a plant that yielded a blue dye, to Europe. Some 200 years after the Portuguese arrived in the Indies, European merchants were still confined to coastal trading posts and various islands. In 1757, however, the British took control of the Indian territory of Bengal after Mughal power collapsed. In the years that follow, Britain would gain control of all of India and absorb it into its colonial empire. The India trade brought the British great wealth, helping them expand into other parts of Asia. Economic power gave them military power, the ability to build ships, equip them with weapons, and engage them in warfare with their competitors. The British ousted the Portuguese from ports such as Ormuz, and battled the Dutch off and on throughout the 1600s. In the 1700s, European demand for spices fell, severely reducing the Dutch East India Company's profits. The demand for Indian textiles, Chinese tea, and other goods rose. The British were well positioned to profit from trading in these goods. After the French general Napoleon Bonaparte conquered the Netherlands in 1795, the British took over most Dutch outposts in the Indies. Great Britain now dominated the Asian trade.